All right, folks. Today I've got two delicious Reddit stories from r/MaliciousCompliance, from a UK high school student turning a medical condition into a school-wide rebellion to an eager cashier who cashes in on an overworked Thanksgiving week. We've got a couple of jaw-dropping tales of people brilliantly turning the tables. Alrighty, let's dive in. All the overtime you want? Okay then, posted by Dog. This tale unfolded a few years back when I was about 19 to 20 years old. As a young lad, I was employed at a local superstore while attending college. I held the position of a cashier. While the job wasn't exactly a joy, it wasn't the worst scenario either. My immediate manager was quite supportive and often shielded us cashiers from the upper echelons of management. With the progression of time came the onset of the hectic holiday season. Specifically, it was the week of Thanksgiving. Since I had the entire week off from school due to the holidays, I was slated to clock in a solid 40 hours at work. Regrettably, my schedule included working on both Thanksgiving and Black Friday. Ordinarily, I would have had Thursdays off, but as Thanksgiving falls on a Thursday, I was compelled to work. On the bright side, the management arranged a generous spread of food in the break room, which was a pleasant gesture. Nonetheless, I was disappointed as I had anticipated spending the holiday with my family, considering I had assumed I would have the day off. Before delving into the malicious compliance part of the story, let me highlight a key aspect of this superstore's policies. The store had a stringent prohibition on overtime, OT. Management would employ every trick in the book to avoid paying for OT. Employees would be given extra lunch breaks or sent home early. In rare instances where an employee did manage to clock in OT, it was either by sheer luck or due to some major problem that they were tasked with resolving. While the managers enjoyed a salaried status, we enlisted workers were fortunate if we received over 38 hours of work per week. As we were a comprehensive store catering to everything from groceries to electronics, we were bracing ourselves for a grueling week. The energy was understandably low among the staff, considering the impending holiday rush. I was particularly nervous, as this was my maiden retail job during the holiday season, and I was well aware of the horror stories associated with it. On that Monday, the store manager, SM, called for a meeting to make a quick announcement. He alerted us that we were considerably behind schedule and had a ton of work pending, hence it was going to be an extremely demanding week. Subsequently, he authorized all OT across all departments from that day until the following Sunday. He instructed the managers and department heads that if any employee wished to work, they should be permitted to do so, as we desperately needed the coverage. In retrospect, it seems he intended to allow employees to come in on their days off and work an extra shift or two, thus adding a few more hours to our paychecks. However, his statement, "If an employee wants to work a shift, let them work," was interpreted a little too liberally by us. We seized the opportunity and worked relentlessly. I managed to pull off 6 double shifts that week. Some employees even parked their RV in the parking lot and worked hours that most likely defied labor laws. We utilized that week to extract every possible hour and cent of overtime. I don't recall the exact figures, but my usual 72-hour paycheck ballooned to approximately 118 hours, with about 42 hours logged as OT, which was compensated at 1.5 times the regular rate. Additionally, employees who worked on Thanksgiving were rewarded with a one-time 25% discount coupon applicable for one large purchase in the store. I used my overtime earnings to buy things from the store, making it feel like an extra 25% added on top. However, the aftermath of that week was rather tumultuous. A couple of days later, corporate executives visited the store and reprimanded the SM when they realized he had openly authorized such an extent of OT. I suspect he realized his mistake early on, but by then, it was too late. Despite the repercussions, the work needed to be done. Even with all the OT, we were barely prepared for the onslaught of Black Friday. After being berated by the executives, the SM vented his frustration on a few managers, questioning why they allowed us to work so much. But their reply was simply a repetition of his own words. If an employee wants to work a shift, let them. It was abundantly clear that such a lenient OT policy would never be implemented again, and the store's original policy would continue to hold. That week, I used my overtime earnings to buy a TV, a month's worth of groceries, Christmas gifts for everyone, a new car battery, 2 new tires, and a few random items for myself. Despite the taxing work hours, it was worth it, and I wouldn't hesitate to repeat it given the opportunity. Well, Who knew that a simple miscommunication could lead to such a payday bonanza? I mean, the phrase, overtime for all, suddenly turns a regular work week into a gold rush. Our guy here is playing 4D chess with the store manager's directives. And the best part? He just clocks in, works, clocks out, and walks away with a monster paycheck. If that isn't the sweetest work more to earn more deal I've ever heard, I don't know what is. Black Friday? Nah, it's Cash In Friday, my friends. Schooled in Compliance, posted by Smooth Area 1206. The story takes place in the late 80s and early 90s in the UK, spanning about 5 years of my life. As I started high school at the age of 11, puberty hit me hard and early. To make matters worse, I had to deal with my skin becoming a blistering, blotchy mess due to acne, eczema, and psoriasis. The condition was so severe that even lying down would leave small blood spots on my shirts, t-shirts, and bed sheets. Over the summer, between my first and second year, my skin worsened. None of the medicated creams were helping, and the only relief I got was from steroids and antibiotics that I was prescribed for frequent chest infections. However, this was not a sustainable solution. In the second year, the high school introduced a new set of rules, one of which pertained to a business-like dress code to prepare us for our work lives after school. My form tutor, Mrs. G, was an understanding woman who was aware of my skin issues and the difficult home life I was enduring due to my parents' split and our strained financial situation. However, the small bloodstains on my shirt, a result of my skin condition, were deemed to be against the new dress code. As the school was strictly enforcing these rules at that time, I received detention, and a letter was sent home. My mother, understandably irritated by this, decided that I would wear an undershirt and short-sleeve shirts to allow the worst affected areas to breathe. We also had our general practitioner issue a medical note regarding my skin condition. Despite our efforts, some particularly strict teachers made a fuss about my arms being visible. They described my condition as appalling and detrimental to the learning environment, despite my classmates being aware and understanding of my situation. This led to me being scolded again and sent for a formal meeting with the head of year tutor, Mr. E, who was generally a pleasant older gentleman who taught languages. Mr. E was sympathetic towards my medical issues and asked our general practitioner to do something about my condition, repeating that it was detrimental to the learning environment. As a student, he said, I was expected to conform to the school's norms. I was given a 14-day window for my skin to improve. Failing to do so, I would face more detentions as per the school policy. 2 weeks passed, and the stress only caused my skin to flare up even more. As a result, I ended up in detention every night for a week, missing the school bus. This frustrated my mother and her employer, as she had to leave work to come and pick me up, considering it would have taken over an hour for me to walk home. Every time I was in detention, either Mr. E or another year tutor would complain about my skin condition and question why I wasn't seeing a doctor. Every time my mother would show them the appointment slips and notes from the GP. Finally, it seemed like the condition of my arms was improving just as my face erupted with acne. Shaving my face was a messy process which frustrated the school even further. My mother suggested that one of the teachers, like Mr. E, attend a doctor's appointment with me and convey their concerns to the doctor. After some discussion, it was decided that Mr. E would accompany me to the doctor. On the day of the appointment, Mr. E complained about the directive from the headmaster, who was an unkempt old teacher with a shabby beard. As my mother went in to speak to the doctor first for her appointment, she explained the situation. I was next to be called in. Mr. E entered the room ahead of me, immediately trying to assert the school rules, using phrases like, "This is school policy," and "our job to prepare them for working life." He insisted that, regardless of the side effects of medication, my skin needed to be clear. The doctor, looking over his glasses, asked him who he was, smiling at my mother. Mr. E was taken aback and didn't have an immediate answer. The doctor asked to see my back and arms, so I removed my shirt. It was the first time Mr. E saw the full extent of my skin condition, and he went white. The doctor mentioned to anyone who was listening that stress and puberty don't help conditions like this, and that given time, they usually settle down. He asked if I had been using the cream, to which I nodded. He picked at one problematic area and removed one of the plaques, saying he would send this to the lab as it looked a little unusual. Mr. E remained quiet as the doctor examined me further, observing how easily my skin bled in certain areas. The doctor then told me I could get dressed again. Turning to Mr. E, he asked, "You're a teacher?" I'm a school governor for X school, our immediate rival, and I'm also on the local education authority board, Mr. E replied, regaining some of his color. The doctor went to his computer and typed out another letter, effectively adding that I could be excused from the usual rules, as a new medical policy was being written by the LEA that all schools must follow. He then told Mr. E he could leave. The doctor sat and chatted with both me and my mother for a while and basically told us to continue what we were doing and that my condition would clear up over time. He said the letters would be at the desk along with another prescription for both of us. My mother gave Mr. E the letter and simply said, "I hope that puts an end to this nonsense." She didn't bother dropping Mr. E back at school. The next day, Mr. E ignored me. Most of the teachers were either their usual grouchy self or overly nice. Mrs. G, however, was her usual cheerful self and asked about the appointment as if she knew what had transpired in the staff meeting. As the end of term approached, I didn't bother shaving for a whole fortnight and let my face rest. When school resumed, I shaved and cleaned up as best as I could. Mr. E, however, was immediately on my case, criticizing my work in his French and Spanish class and finding fault in general. Every day I would go home and tell my mother about it, and she would take notes. Now, in my third year of high school, or year 9, I was 14 years old, and it was 1991. My skin was healing in some parts, but my face looked like a volcano. I had grown out a neat little mustache, which my mother helped me trim neatly. We had also managed to address the issue of my extremely dry lips, so I could eat and drink without them splitting, which had previously deterred me from eating. At this point, the new medical exemption had come into effect, compelling the school to amend their rules. As I got off the bus, I could see the teachers immediately reacting to my facial hair, and they weren't pleased. I made it to lunchtime before I was physically dragged by my collar into the year tutor's office, where 3 of them and a deputy head berated me about it. They demanded that I remove my mustache, even going so far as to hand me a single cheap razor that looked as if it had been used. I refused to shave, citing my medical note, and declined to use anyone else's razor purely for my own safety given my existing issues. Consequently, I was sent home. My mother had been called earlier, so she contacted the doctor about this incident, considering his role in the LEA. The next day, I arrived at school with my mustache still intact and was summoned to the headmaster's office. There, I was introduced to the chair of the LEA and my doctor, with the head looking somewhat chastised. The chair had already been shown photos of my back and arms by my doctor. He could see what was happening with my face and the neatly trimmed mustache, and after asking me a few questions, he assured me that this wasn't my fault. He informed me that a new rule was being put in place, especially for my school, and it would be checked regularly. Any student could ask for a surprise check to be made by LEA staff. The new rule stated that if students were expected to live by the strict dress and appearance code, so were the teachers. Exceptions were only allowed for those with medical exemptions like mine, and even then, the facial hair had to be neat and tidy. I was present when an announcement was made over the rarely used school tannoy system, which was reiterated in the school assemblies over the following week. Letters were sent home to parents, and there seemed to be a collective sigh of relief among them. It turned out I wasn't the only one who had been struggling with the school rules. The teachers were given 2 weeks to adjust. The whole LEA was present to check on the teachers, and several of them had public meltdowns over their appearance, including the deputy head, Mrs. B, who normally wore layers of makeup and blue eyeshadow. She insisted she was exempt because she was the deputy head. Stories about this spread around the school like wildfire. Even Mr. R, the headmaster, had to shave off his beard. Yes, I received more grief about my situation, but Mrs. G shielded my grades from it. The mustache stayed until the end of my time in high school. Funnily enough, my skin seemed to clear up almost instantaneously over the summer. So by my first day of college to do my A-levels, my face was clear and I could shave off the mustache. My brother attended the school the September after I left. The teachers didn't give him a hard time for fear of what he might do. However, the firm rule about teachers' appearance stayed in place until the school merged with its rival back in 2013. Oh, Mr. E, you played a dangerous game, my friend. Trying to implement a strict school rule against a condition that can't be controlled? That's like trying to control the weather with a classroom rule. I mean, you there. Yes, you the storm cloud. No raining in the corridors. And then boom. The kid brings in a storm of medical directives, and the moment when Mr. E turns white after seeing the full extent of the skin condition, priceless. Talk about school lessons you won't forget. Remember, kids, empathy. It's not in the school curriculum, but it should be. Hey, wait! As always, don't forget to kindly tap the like button, share, subscribe, and let me know in the comments below what you would have done if you were in this situation. Stay safe out there in that crazy world. Much love, peace.